This right here is actually an empty patient chart that I have for my home, and I am actually going to talk about the admission process when the resident moves in. This is what I do, and I'm going to talk about that in this video, so if you guys are interested, go ahead and stick around. What's up, everyone? I hope you guys are all doing well. If you're new here, my name is Serge. Welcome to the channel. To all my reoccurring viewers, guys, thank you so much for subscribing, for liking, for commenting. And if you guys haven't yet, I actually started a Facebook group that I mentioned in the previous video. So if you guys haven't joined that yet, go ahead and make sure you guys go join that. I'm gonna just put it up here, and I'm also gonna put it in the description. So make sure you guys go join it, okay? So let's go ahead and jump into the topic of this video. Now, when a resident moves in, you gotta have an admission process, guys. And if you don't, make sure you guys start creating a checklist to make it easier for not only you, but also the family. So usually what I do is I start out with a checklist, right? If a family knows that they're gonna move a loved one into my home and we've come to a mutual agreement that they're gonna choose my home and that they're gonna move their loved one in, I give them a checklist before they move in of things that they need. This checklist pretty much consists of making sure that they bring all the documents that is needed for the facility and everything that is required by the state for me to have in their chart, okay? And then it's a pretty long list, but I usually give it to them and it's pretty summed up nicely and easy for them and convenient. So usually I just go ahead and I give them that, and I said, okay, don't worry about if you can't get everything, but try your best to try to get everything. And if they're being discharged from like a rehab or from a hospital, usually they'll just hand it to the discharge planner and they get them everything that they need in order to move them into my home. The first thing that I usually give them is literally a form, and it's for the doctor to sign off to say that they are able to move into my home, and I make sure that they sign off on that, and also that the doctor signs off on that saying that they are able to move into my home. Once they actually do move in, there is a chart that I start for them, and it's usually tabbed off. You can't see, maybe you can, but it's tabbed off with certain things, right? So I'm gonna actually read through the tabs here for you guys. The first tab I usually start out with is their identification cards, their DNR, their intake data, and their admission orders. The admission orders is that form that I talked about from the doctor, right? They need to have that signed off before they come in. Then I start with the service plan. It's also called a care plan in other states. It could be called something else. I do a medication review list, and then I do my own assessment, and then any HMPs, which is also history and physical, if that's available and if they come with it. And then also moving down to the third tab is the flu and pneumonia vaccine. Then also the TB, which is tuberculosis, if you guys don't know what that stands for. And then also their continued residency, which is part of their residency agreement or contract. So that's also in that third tab. In the fourth tab, I have medical practitioner orders, and that's where also I put all the new medication orders. That's where I put it in. And then also verbal order confirmations, right? If you get a phone call from somebody who's giving the orders, an NP, a PA, or even just a doctor or their assistant. Then you also have this is where I also, in the fifth tab, I actually put their medication administration records, their ADLs, their service notes, and these are from like the previous months. So like a month will go by, this is where I put all the previous months. And then also any unusual occurrence reports, which is also called incident reports, I put in that fifth tab. And then any transportation reports, I put in that fifth tab. And then in the sixth tab, I put any delivery of medical devices, I put in there. The personal property inventory, that is part of their intake, I put there in the sixth tab. And then any emergency disaster orientation, it's part of the intake, so I put that there too. And then authorizations and liability releases, meaning, you know, if I needed to take pictures, whatever, that form is also in here. That's also part of the intake data, which we'll get to in a little bit. And then in the seventh tab, I have here the residence agreement, which is also called the contract between the resident and the POA and the home or the group home and the business. Any addendums that are added to that contract or to that residence agreement goes in that seventh tab. The living will, pharmacy agreement, which is, you know, for the pharmacy, if they're delivering, that's where you'd put it in. And then any legal documentations, right? Any, you know, POA documentation, anything that's legal documents, even their DNR, which I keep in the first tab, like I mentioned earlier. And then also there's an eighth tab here, And this is kind of more like just miscellaneous things, and then also facility admission checklist, which I do give to the family, but I ask them to bring it back if possible with everything checked off. I put it there. If I do terminate a residency agreement, I would put it in that A tab down here, and then a discharging checklist, and then a humans release form if a resident does unfortunately pass away. That's where I would put that form, saying that I did release all their remains with the mortuary, right? And so moving on, the first thing I do once they move in, so that's pretty much all the tabs that I have in the chart. And then moving on, I actually do a health assessment, right? My personal health assessment of the resident when they move in. So it's pretty much a pretty straightforward assessment. It's 2 pages. It's a front and back page. And then I do an intake data. This is the portion that takes the longest actually, and it's about 2 to 3 hours of just going through and interviewing not only the POA but also the resident. So the first one is pretty much everything about the resident. That's the first page. The second page is their emergency contacts. It's pretty much all the contacts for the resident. And then moving on is an about me page, which is just anything about the resident, right? Anything that they prefer, what they don't like, what they do like, just to get to know the resident better. Activities that they like, things they like to drink, coffee, tea, milk, anything of that sort is all in that page. Moving on is a history of their medical condition, right? So a P&H, pretty much, a physical and history, or H&P, sorry, excuse me. I know some of you guys that are in the healthcare are like, what is a P&H? I meant H&P, excuse that. And then also moving on is the flu and vaccination, which I mentioned in one of the tabs. That is pretty much stating that if they do have their flu and their pneumo vaccine already done, you can actually put the dates here, and then you can also put if they just refuse to have any of those taken. So, they sign off on that. Moving on, just more vaccination information for the family. And then also personal items. This is where you start taking inventory of what the resident has brought in. So that's a form on its own. Actually, it's 2 forms. And I do have a checklist here for them, like I've mentioned. And then I have a disaster and evacuation plan. So pretty much what this pretty much means is that as long as I, do an orientation with them, okay guys, if something were to happen, this is where we exit, this is where we go. So I go through with this with the family and then the resident. Mainly it's the family that I talk to, because the resident either has dementia or Alzheimer's or doesn't quite understand. So usually they always have a POA that I discuss all of this with. And then the authorization liability release, like I mentioned, it's to pretty much give us permission to take care of them, to if we need to do anything, we have the authority to do it. And then also moving on, let's see, if I were to walk through all of this with you guys, it would literally be a super long video, which is like super in depth. But this is pretty much giving you guys a summary of what it is. And then I have another inventory page here, and it's a more detailed inventory. So you have an inventory when they come in, and then you have inventory when they go out, and you have to sign off on both of them, so you cross-reference everything to make sure that they take everything with them. So that's the inventory. And then that's pretty much it on the intake data. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. It just takes more time when you're actually doing it with the family. You guys can see it's a few pages here. I believe it's like 15 pages, I think. And then last thing is that what we have here is the contract, or also known as the residency agreement. So you go through, and this is where you write down what the price or what your rate's going to be and what they're going to be paying on a monthly deal. So you go through here and you make sure that you fill all these out. This is about a 10-page contract that they have to go through and that you read through, and it's a lot of writing and a lot of going through, but for the most part it's pretty simple. Once I know the contract in and out. It's just like doing real estate. If you know how to do a purchase contract, if you've done many of them, like the back of your hand, right? That's kind of how I know this contract. So, you know, because you do it, you know, especially when you start out in the beginning, you go through this a lot, and you pretty much start just pointing out the important things to the families, and then you give them a copy. Once you do sign off on everything, you give the family a copy, and they can read through all the nitty-gritty details. And yeah, guys, that is pretty much the residency agreement. And once you get that done, you can pretty much start getting everything going for the resident, and then you just keep everything on file. And you want to make sure you do this in a timely fashion. You don't want to like put this off, you know, because then you have to start doing the care plan, right? The care plan you have to have, at least here in the state of Arizona, done within 14 days if they are, you know, personal level of care. And you got to make sure you get everything properly done, and you want to do it in a timely fashion, and you don't want to miss anything or forget about something, and then you end up going through your inspection and they ding you for something that was so like minimal, right? And it was just a piece of form that all you had to do was get signed, and you forgot to get it signed. And you want to make sure that that's kind of how you do it, right? So you want to start out with the admission order that the doctor signs off on, and then you also want to do a medication review that the doctor also signs off on, and that you sign off on as a manager, or if you hire a manager, make sure they sign off on it, and they should know how to do all this stuff. Then thirdly, you want to make sure you do the resident intake data, which I just kind of went through and gave you guys a more just a summary of it and what it consists of. So make sure you have that. And then you want to make sure you guys have a residency agreement or contract in place to make sure that you're covered and that they hold up their end of the bargain, right? And make sure that you get paid for the services you guys are providing. And guys, that is pretty much what the admission process consists of. And it does take a little bit to kind of build the system in place, and it is a lot, and it is very overwhelming in the beginning. But it's not something, you know, you build a system to it and you get better and better as you do it more often. And it's really not that bad now that I look back on it. In the beginning, it definitely was, because I was doing, when you start out, you know, you're admitting a lot of new residents, and so you're having to do this quite often in the beginning. It definitely, once you get the proper residents in here, it slows down and you're not having to do this as much. Guys, hopefully this helped, and if it did help, go ahead, hit that like button. Also, make sure you guys go and follow and request to get into this group. It's called Legion Assisted Living Academy, and it's a group pretty much to help you guys and to answer any questions that you guys have, and to be able to do like live videos with you guys, and you know, just help you guys out more. So, you know, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet. And if you guys made it all the way to the end of the video, you guys are the real OGs. I appreciate every single one of you guys. So guys, go watch these other videos if you haven't, and I will see you guys all in the next video. God bless. Peace.